I smiled that morning. I don't know why I smiled. Perhaps it was a reflex, or perhaps I thought it would protect me from what I was about to hear. When I called her my daughter-in-law, I only wanted to ask a simple question. It had been on my mind for weeks, the wedding. I wanted to know when the wedding would be, not to pressure, not to remind, just to feel included in something so important in my son's life. Her voice answered the phone. Calm, polite, gentle. "Oh, we got married yesterday," she said. Yesterday. The word sank into me slowly, like rain soaking into dry earth. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the phone still in my hand, unsure if the walls around me were real or if I was just dreaming. I smiled, a smile I did not feel. I congratulated her softly, and then I hung up. I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I didn't even move. I thought about my son, about us. I thought about the small hands I held as he slept, the sleepless nights, the long mornings of making breakfast, of finding lost socks, of wiping tears and teaching him how to be kind. I thought about the years I waited for him to grow, to become his own person, to find happiness. I thought about the fact that now happiness was something I would watch from the outside. I poured myself a cup of tea, though I did not feel the warmth. I drank slowly, letting the silence fill the space between sips. I whispered to myself, "It's okay." But it wasn't. It had never been okay. I remembered the first time he brought her home. She was polite then, quiet, careful not to upset me, not to cross lines she did not yet understand. I welcomed her. I offered her food. I asked her questions. I smiled at her and nodded at her answers, believing that this was the beginning of a gentle bond. But the bond had never fully formed. Small things changed first. Small moments that you only notice when you look back. He stopped calling as often. Visits became shorter. Dinner conversations ended sooner. I told myself it was natural. Young couples need space. I must understand. But deep down, I knew. I felt it in the empty chair across from me at the dining table. I felt it in the quiet rooms where laughter had once echoed. I felt it in the way my son no longer asked for advice, no longer shared his small worries, his simple joys, and now, the wedding, yesterday, without me, I did not speak to him immediately. I could not. My throat felt thick, my words heavy with something I could not name. I sat by the window, staring at nothing. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the clock seemed to tick with judgment. I tried to replay every memory, every conversation. Was there a sign I missed, a moment when I could have said something, done something that might have mattered? I remembered the little mornings. He would wake up early and find me already in the kitchen, tea steaming in small cups, toast lightly browned, eggs ready. He would sit beside me, rubbing his eyes, and whisper, "Mom, can we talk later?" And I would smile. Smile, always tell him I had time, even if I did not. I remembered the first day he rode his bike alone. He was scared. I was scared. I stood at the curb and watched him wobble, holding my breath until he found balance. He smiled at me, triumphant, and I had clapped and cried silently. I remembered the night he graduated. I held his hand, proud beyond words, as we walked into the hall filled with strangers. I whispered to him, "I am so proud of you." He had looked at me, smiling, but his eyes were already shifting towards someone else, someone outside of me, someone new. And now, yesterday was already taken. I had missed it. I tried to find comfort in the small things. The kettle boiling, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint sound of a bird outside the window. I tried to remind myself that I had done my best. I had given my love fully, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. But the love I gave, it seemed, had not been enough. Not enough to warrant a place at the table. Not enough to receive a simple invitation. I remembered calling him once, asking if he would like me to join a small family dinner. He had smiled politely over the phone. "Maybe next time, Mom," he had said. That next time never came. The house felt emptier than ever. Even the walls seemed to whisper words I did not want to hear. I sat in the silence and let my thoughts drift into darker corners I had avoided for years, and for the first time in a long time, I felt small, invisible, unnecessary. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not run. I simply sat and listened to the quiet echo of yesterday. I remembered how he used to run to me when he was scared, how I had always been there to catch him. And now, I could not catch this moment. I could not hold on to the day that had slipped silently past me. I whispered into the empty room, "I am happy for you." Though my heart felt hollow, I did not know who I was speaking to: the walls, the empty chairs, or the memory of the child I once held. I had wanted to be part of this life. I had wanted to see him smile on his wedding day, and yet I had only seen it through silence and absence. I poured myself another cup of tea. It was bitter, not from the leaves, but from the realization that love sometimes leaves no space for those who give it first. I remembered the nights I stayed awake praying for his safety, for his happiness, for his peace. And now I realized my prayers were answered in a way I could not recognize. I was not angry. I was not resentful. I was empty. The sky outside had begun to gray. A quiet drizzle started, soft on the roof, soft on the windows. It felt like the world was crying in silence alongside me. I realized then that some pain does not scream. Some heartbreak does not demand attention. Some grief is silent, quiet, and it sits with you like a shadow you cannot move. And so I sat, alone, with the echo of a day I was not invited to, a celebration I did not witness, and a life I had helped build but could no longer touch. I smiled again, because that was all I had left. After that morning, the world felt quieter, though nothing had changed. The house still had the same walls, the same rooms, the same furniture, yet it all seemed different, smaller, colder, and heavier. I moved through my day as if I were watching myself from far away. I made breakfast, I poured tea, I checked the mail, but each motion felt hollow. Even the familiar sounds, the kettle whistling, the refrigerator humming, felt like echoes in someone else's life, not mine. I thought about calling my son. I wanted to hear his voice. I wanted to pretend that everything was okay, but I did not, I could not, because I knew what would happen. A polite voice, a careful laugh, a few words of reassurance, and then silence. I thought about all the years we had spent together, all the nights I had stayed awake when he was sick, all the mornings I had waited for him to wake up, all the small conversations that seemed meaningless at the time, but had been everything. Now they were just memories, memories I could touch, but not live. I tried to find him in them, but he was always just beyond reach. I remembered the first time he had cried in front of me. He had been about 6 years old. His knee had scraped, and the blood was thin and red on his skin. I had cleaned it, kissed it, and held him until he stopped shaking. He had looked at me then, with trust in his eyes, as if I could fix anything in the world. I thought about that look now, and it made my chest ache, because I realized that the child who had trusted me without question had grown into a man who could leave me out of the most important day of his life without hesitation. I tried to reason with myself. Perhaps it was a mistake, perhaps they had been rushed, perhaps there had been reasons I could not see, but the truth was undeniable. I had been excluded, and worse, I could not even feel anger. It had been replaced by a quiet, hollow sadness. I moved through my days like this for weeks. I cleaned the house, I cooked for myself, I sat alone at the table, I listened to the clock tick, I listened to the rain fall on the roof, I listened to the silence in every corner of the house. Sometimes I would catch myself imagining what it would have been like if I had been there. The ceremony, the smiling faces, the flowers, my son standing tall, happy, confident, her hand in his. I imagined myself reaching out, brushing her hair behind her ear, telling him quietly that I was proud. And then I would stop myself, because imagining it was not the same as living it, and living it was no longer possible. I remembered the way he used to talk to me as a boy. He would share every detail of his day, every worry, every hope, every small triumph, every small failure. I had listened, I had never interrupted, I had never judged, I had always been there. Now, he spoke to me only when he had to, a quick phone call, a short message, a passing word. The warmth had gone from our conversations. The intimacy had vanished. I began to notice other things too, the way she spoke to me, polite, yes, but distant, guarded, like I was a stranger in the house I had built, like I was a visitor in my own family. I remembered the small kindnesses I had offered her, the meals I had cooked, the advice I had given, the time I had spent trying to make her feel welcome. And now it seemed none of it mattered. I began to question myself. Had I done something wrong? Had I failed as a mother? Had I failed as a grandmother, even? I replayed every conversation, every moment, searching for an answer I would never find. And the more I searched, the more invisible I felt. I thought about the first time he brought her home for dinner. She had been careful then, trying not to upset anyone. I had smiled, offered her food, asked her questions. I had tried to include her in our lives, to make her feel safe, and yet here we were, yesterday, already gone, already a memory I could not touch. I tried to distract myself with small tasks. I cleaned the living room. I dusted the shelves. I washed the windows. I walked around the garden, looking at the plants I had nurtured, wondering if I was nurturing myself at all. I tried to read books. I tried to watch television. But every story, every image reminded me of absence, of a place I could not reach. Sometimes at night I would hear the laughter of children from the neighborhood. It would remind me of him when he was small. And I would feel a sharp, hollow ache in my chest. I remembered the birthdays I had planned, the small parties with balloons and cake, the nights we stayed up late, playing board games and telling stories. I had been there for every small moment. I had tried to make life bright for him, and now I was not even invited to the brightest moment of his adult life. I tried to talk to a friend about it once. "I don't understand," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I have given everything. I have always been there, and still, I am not part of it." She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. "But sometimes children don't realize what they leave behind," she said softly. Her words were meant to comfort me. They didn't. I realized then that comfort would have to come from inside, but inside, there was only emptiness. I began to notice the little things that reminded me of him. The chair he used to sit in at the table, the cup he always drank from, the small socks I had washed every week for years. They were all there, still present, still waiting, and yet he was gone. I remembered the night he graduated. I had held his hand, proud beyond words. I had whispered to him, "I am so proud of you." And now I realized that the pride I felt then could not change the distance between us. I thought about calling him again. Maybe I could ask about the wedding. Maybe I could ask for pictures. Maybe I could pretend that everything was okay, but I did not. I could not, because pretending would be a lie, and I had spent a lifetime being honest, quietly, without fanfare. I thought about the nights I had prayed for him, prayers for his safety, prayers for his happiness, prayers for his peace, and now I realized those prayers had been answered in a way I could not accept. I remembered the small moments of joy we had shared, the mornings when he would wake me with a smile, the afternoons when we walked in the park, talking about nothing and everything, the evenings when he would sit beside me, leaning on my shoulder, trusting me completely. And now, those moments were gone, lost to time, lost to distance, lost to yesterday. I did not cry, I did not scream, I did not run away. I simply sat and waited for something I could not name. The days passed slowly, each one blending into the next, each one a quiet reminder that life moves forward, even when you are left behind. I tried to find solace in small routines, making tea, washing dishes, watering plants, but nothing could fill the space left in my heart. I thought about the life we had built together, the home we had shared, the memories we had created, and I realized those things could not protect me from being forgotten. I began to accept it, slowly, quietly, not with peace, not with understanding, but with a soft resignation that left a hollow ache in my chest. I remembered the first time he had ridden his bike alone. I had stood at the curb, holding my breath, watching him wobble and then find balance. He had smiled at me, triumphant, and I had clapped, tears streaming down my face. Now, I could not even clap. I could not even smile. I could only remember, and remembering hurt more than the absence itself. I realized then that some pain does not end, some heartbreak does not resolve, some grief is permanent, like a shadow that follows you, quiet and unyielding. And so I lived with it, quietly, alone, with the echo of yesterday, a day I could not touch, a life I could not share. I smiled again, because that was all I had left. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. And still, the quiet remained. I learned to move through the house without expecting a sound. No footsteps on the stairs, no laughter in the kitchen, no door opening to announce his arrival. Even the phone seemed hesitant to ring. And when it did, it was always brief, a few polite words, a quick, distant laugh, and then silence. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could find comfort in remembering him as a child. But memories are cruel companions. They remind you of what you have lost, what you cannot regain, and what no one can replace. I remembered the mornings he would wake before dawn, still sleepy, rubbing his eyes, looking for me. I would smile even if I was tired. Even if I had barely slept, I would pour him a cup of warm milk. I would brush his hair gently, tell him it was going to be a good day, and it always was for a moment. Now, mornings are empty. No footsteps, no soft voice asking questions, no small hands clutching mine. Just silence and the aching knowledge that I am not part of the life I built. I thought about the dinner tables we had shared, the small traditions, the family stories, the quiet laughter after a long day. I had tried to teach him the value of kindness, patience, and empathy. I had hoped those lessons would carry him through life, and yet, I was left outside the life he had chosen. I began to notice small changes in myself. I no longer looked forward to the phone ringing. I no longer imagined him walking through the door with a smile. I no longer hoped to hear news about their lives. I tried not to think about the wedding. I tried not to replay the words she had spoken. We got married yesterday. But the words echoed endlessly in my mind. A simple sentence, a single moment, and yet it contained everything I had lost. I remembered the small things he used to do that showed he cared. Leaving a note on the table, a small drawing, a whispered "I love you" at night. I had treasured them all. I had kept them folded in small boxes, hidden in drawers, waiting for the day he would need to see them again. But now, they felt meaningless because he did not need them, because I did not exist in his new life. I began to withdraw further into my own world. I would sit by the window for hours, staring at nothing. The rain falling, the wind shifting, the trees bending in the cold, everything alive around me, everything moving forward, and yet I remained still, a quiet observer in a world I could no longer touch. Sometimes I thought about calling him, just to hear his voice, just to ask about her, just to feel connected, even in a small way. But then I imagined the conversation, polite words, quick exchanges, and the reminder of how far away I had become, and I could not bring myself to do it. I thought about the nights he had cried in my arms, the scraped knees, the nightmares, the moments of fear that he had confided only to me. I had been there, always, and now I was gone. I tried to find solace in other things, books, music, the garden, but nothing could replace the presence I had lost. Nothing could fill the empty spaces at the table, in the hallway, in the small corners of the home where he used to be. I thought about the holidays we had celebrated together, the small family meals, the laughter, the teasing, the warmth. I remembered every detail, every scent, every sound, every fleeting moment of happiness. And I realized those memories were mine alone now. I could not share them. I could not relive them. They were ghosts that only I could see. I remembered the first day he rode his bike alone. I had been so proud, so anxious, so relieved. And now I could not even feel that pride without pain, because pride could not erase absence. Pride could not bring back a moment lost forever. I began to feel invisible, not in the way of being ignored, but in the way of not existing. Like a shadow in a room that no one notices, like a voice that is heard but not understood, like a presence that is felt but never acknowledged. I tried to speak to him in my mind. I whispered his name quietly, softly, as if it might reach him across the distance. But the words never left the walls of my home. They fell into the silence and dissolved. I remembered how he used to share his small triumphs with me, a good grade, a new friend, a victory in a game. I had celebrated each one as if the world itself had shifted with his happiness, and now his victories were shared elsewhere. His life had grown into something I could no longer touch. I thought about how easy it had once been to be part of his world. The small gestures, the quiet moments, the shared laughter, and I wondered when it had all shifted. When had I stopped being necessary? When had I become invisible in the life I had built? I remembered his graduation night. The pride I felt, holding his hand as we walked into the hall, the tears I had hidden as I whispered, "I am so proud of you." And now, pride felt hollow because the person I had raised no longer needed me. I began to accept the quiet, not with peace, not with understanding, but with a soft, aching resignation. I remembered the first time he cried in my arms, the fear, the trust, the vulnerability. I had been there for every moment. And yet, I could not be there for the moment that mattered most. The moment when he committed his life to someone else. The moment when he stepped into a new chapter without me. I felt small, invisible, and deeply, quietly broken. I tried to fill the empty days with small routines. Tea in the morning, meals prepared carefully, a walk in the garden. But each day ended with the same quiet ache. I remembered the mornings when he would wake before dawn, when he would search for me for comfort, for safety, and now he would wake and I would not be there, and he would not notice, and he would not care. I tried to imagine the wedding day, the flowers, the ceremony, the smiles, the people gathered, and my absence. It was unbearable, and yet I could not change it. I could not reach across the distance. I could not reclaim what was lost, so I sat alone with the echo of a life that had moved on without me. I whispered softly to no one, to the walls, to the empty rooms, "I am happy for you." And the words sounded hollow even to me because I was not happy. I was not part of it. I was nothing in the life I had given everything to. I remembered all the small moments of care I had offered her, the meals, the advice, the time, the effort, and I realized they had meant nothing. They had not secured my place. They had not kept me close. I thought about calling him just to hear his voice, just to hear something familiar, but I could not, because every word would remind me of my absence. And I could not bear it. I tried to sleep, but sleep did not come easily. The bed felt large and empty. The silence pressed down on me. The memories pressed down on me. I thought about all the times I had been needed, all the times I had been trusted, all the times I had been the one he turned to, and now I was not needed, I was not trusted, I was invisible. I whispered again, quietly, softly, to the empty room, "I am proud of you." And even as I said it, I knew it would not reach him. It would remain in the walls, a secret grief that no one would ever see. And so I remained, silent, alone, with the quiet that remains when someone you love moves on without you. The weeks turned into months, and still the house held its quiet. A quiet so thick that it felt alive, pressing against me in every room, in every corner. I walked through the halls slowly, touching the surfaces as if they could tell me something I could not hear. The walls remembered him. The floors remembered his footsteps. The chairs remembered the weight of his small body, and I remembered everything. I thought about the first time he had gone to school. I had walked him to the bus stop, holding his hand tightly. His small fingers curled into mine, trusting me completely. I had whispered, "Be brave, be kind, and remember, I am always here." He had nodded, half excited, half afraid, and then he had run onto the bus. I remembered the afternoons we spent reading together, the way he would curl up beside me, leaning his head against my shoulder, the stories we read, the lessons we learned, the laughter, the gentle scolding, the quiet understanding, and now none of it mattered, because yesterday had passed, because he had chosen a life where I did not exist, because I was no longer part of the moments that defined him. I tried to distract myself with small routines, cleaning, cooking, walking in the garden, but each activity ended the same way, with the weight of absence pressing down on me. I thought about the day she told me they had married. Her calm voice, the words that cut through me silently. "We got married yesterday." I had smiled, as I always did, and then I had sat alone, feeling the hollow ache of being forgotten. I wondered why it hurt so much, why the absence of a simple invitation could pierce me so deeply. Was it pride? Was it love? Was it the loss of my place in his life? I did not know. All I knew was the emptiness and the quiet that refused to leave. Sometimes I imagined him in his new life, smiling at her, holding her hand, laughing at things I would never hear, and I would feel a sharp ache in my chest, a pain so quiet and constant that it became a part of me. I tried to reach out once. I had picked up the phone, I had dialed his number, and then I had hung up. I could not, because I knew what would happen: polite words, brief conversation, and then silence again. I thought about the small traditions we had shared: birthday cakes, Christmas mornings, late night talks. I had tried to create a home full of warmth, full of love, and yet it had not been enough to keep me in his life. I remembered the mornings he had woken me, still sleepy, rubbing his eyes. I had smiled and poured him tea. I had kissed his forehead and whispered, "Good morning, my love." And now he woke in a world where I was invisible. I began to notice changes in myself. I no longer expected calls. I no longer imagined visits. I no longer hoped to hear about their lives. I tried to fill my days with small comforts: books, music, the garden. But every sound, every image reminded me of absence, reminded me of a life I could not reach. I remembered the first scraped knee, the first night he had cried in my arms. I had held him and whispered, "It's okay, I am here." And now there was no one to hold, no one to comfort, no one to share the quiet of the night with. I thought about calling him again, to ask about the wedding, to ask how he was, to ask if he remembered me. But I knew the answer. He did not need me, he had moved on, and so I remained silent. I remembered the nights I had stayed awake praying, prayers for his safety, prayers for his happiness, prayers for his life to be good. And now those prayers had been answered in a way I could not accept. The house felt smaller now, the rooms felt emptier, even the furniture seemed to sigh with absence. I began to feel invisible in a way I had never known. Not ignored, not unnoticed, but erased, as if my presence had no weight, no meaning, no purpose. I remembered all the small moments that had once mattered: the first day of school, the scraped knee, the whispered secrets, the quiet laughter, and I realized they were gone, gone from the life he now led, gone from the world that continued without me. I thought about the small kindnesses I had offered her, the meals I had cooked, the advice I had given, the time I had spent trying to make her feel welcome, and none of it had secured my place, none of it had kept me close. I felt a quiet anger, not at him, not at her, but at the way life had moved forward without me, at the way love could be given endlessly and still leave you unseen. I tried to remember the joy I once felt, the mornings, the evenings, the quiet moments of connection, but the memories were bittersweet, sharp as glass cutting into my chest. I realized that some grief does not fade, some pain does not heal, some absence does not end. I sat in the empty house and whispered his name, softly, quietly, hoping somehow he could hear it across the distance, hoping somehow he would remember the life we shared. But no answer came, and so I remained, silent, alone, with the memory of yesterday that could not be reclaimed. I smiled again, because that was all I had left. I remembered the first time he had cried in my arms, the fear, the trust, the vulnerability, and I realized I would never hold that child again. I would never see that small, trusting face. The house felt colder. The days felt longer. The nights felt endless. I thought about all the times I had been needed, all the times I had been trusted, all the times I had been loved, and now I was not needed. I was not trusted. I was invisible. I whispered once more, "I am proud of you." But the words fell into the silence, unheeded, unreceived, lost forever, and the quiet remained. Time continued to pass, though it felt meaningless. Days blurred into nights and nights into days, and still the silence followed me like a shadow. I moved through the house as if I were invisible, touching the furniture, the walls, the rooms, searching for some reminder of him, some proof that he had ever been part of my world. But the reminders were empty. The chairs remembered his small weight. The table remembered the meals we shared. The windows remembered the sunlight falling on his face. And I remembered everything. I thought about the first time he had walked to school alone. I had let go of his hand at the gate, my heart heavy, my throat tight, and I whispered, "Be brave, be kind, I am always here." He had waved, ran onto the bus, and I had smiled through the tears that no one saw. Now that child was gone, and I could not even wave. I could not even be there. I thought about the small moments that had once been everything, the scraped knees, the whispered secrets, the bedtime stories, the small victories and failures we celebrated together. Every little thing I had done to build his life, to love him, to guide him, to nurture him. All of it felt meaningless now. I remembered the morning I learned about their wedding. Her voice soft, calm, polite. "We got married yesterday." A sentence so simple, yet it tore through me quietly, irreversibly. I had smiled, but inside I broke. I tried to accept it. Tried to tell myself it was okay. Tried to find comfort in memories, in routines, in small distractions. But comfort never came, only emptiness, only the quiet. I thought about calling him to ask about her, to ask about the wedding. To hear his voice, but I could not, because hearing his voice, polite, distant, careful, would have only reminded me of my absence, and so I remained silent. I whispered his name into empty rooms. I whispered softly to the walls, to the floors, to the quiet corners of our home, but no one answered. I remembered all the nights I had stayed awake, praying for him, praying for his safety, praying for his happiness, praying for a life full of love and peace, and now those prayers had been answered in a way I could not accept. A life full of love, but a life in which I had no place. I walked through the house slowly, touching the small traces of him that remained. A cup he always used, a chair where he had sat, a drawer he had kept organized, everything present, and yet everything a reminder of my absence. I remembered the first time he cried in my arms, the fear, the vulnerability, the trust. And now, that child had grown into a man whose life had moved on without me, and I could not hold him again. I could not comfort him again. I could not smile at him again. I thought about all the mornings, the afternoons, the evenings we had shared. All the small joys, the whispered secrets, the quiet laughter, all the moments that had built a life that now existed somewhere I could not reach. I tried to fill my days with small tasks, tea in the morning, meals prepared carefully, a walk in the garden, but each day ended the same way, with the echo of his absence pressing against me. Sometimes I imagined him happy, smiling, holding her hand, laughing, and the image hurt me in a way that was quiet, deep, and unrelenting. I realized that some pain does not fade, some grief does not end, some absence stays with you quietly, softly for a lifetime. I whispered once more, "I am proud of you," and the words fell into the silence. No one heard them, no one ever would. I thought about calling him one last time, to reach across the distance to ask for a connection, but I knew it would not change anything. It could not bring back the day I was left out. It could not repair the space between us. It could not return yesterday, and so I did not call. I sat in the quiet, holding a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. I stared at the rain outside the window, listening to it fall softly on the roof. The world moved on, others moved on, and I remained. I thought about all the small kindnesses I had offered her, all the time, the effort, the care, and yet none of it had mattered. None of it had ensured that I would be part of their lives. And the realization settled over me like a heavy, quiet fog. I thought about all the moments I had lived for him, the scraped knees, the night terrors, the small triumphs, every bedtime story, every hug, every whispered word. All of it now existed only in memory. I realized that some love is invisible, some love is given endlessly, quietly, and without expectation, and sometimes it is never returned in the way we hope. I whispered again, softly, to no one, "I am happy for you," but the words were empty. They were a hollow echo in the walls, a quiet acknowledgement of a life I could no longer touch, and finally I understood. I understood that love sometimes leaves you unseen, sometimes it leaves you outside, sometimes it leaves you with memories that ache, sometimes it leaves you with only silence. I sat in the quiet house, the rain falling softly, and I smiled, because that is all I had left, a smile, and the quiet knowledge that life moves forward, even when you are left behind. And so I remained, silent, alone, with yesterday forever lost.